Hello friends, welcome to your channel Demystify Frontend, and this is the second video in the series Build Your Own Angular Forms. Yes, we are creating the Angular form from the scratch, and we will let you know the inner details of Angular forms, like how it is created, what's the engineering behind it. So let's get started. So these are the key topics which we are going to cover in this video today. So we will start with the basic understanding of data binding, what is two-way data binding actually, and how it works and what problem it solves for you. That is very important. Then we will understand the two-way data binding implementation in Angular. From the Angular perspective, we will know how it is implemented over there. So without wasting your time, let's get started. So let's first understand the concept of data binding, two-way data binding, what it is in general. Okay, then we will deep dive into the Angular perspective, like how Angular implements it through ngModel or many other directives. So let's understand it in general first. So I have picked one scenario to make it easy for you. Okay, so suppose you are visiting a e-commerce website. Let's you visit amazon.com. So what you see there, you see list of products, you see product catalog, basically the listing of products, and you can select any of the products, you can add them to the cart. Okay, so let's see, we have a couple of products and we added few of them into the cart by clicking on add to cart button. Okay, now what happens? So this is the UI representation for the cart. So we have selected a few items from the product catalog, and they are shown here in the cart. Now what the user basically he see the UI, but as a developer, there are two parts to it. One is the UI, another is the state. So you put all your data in the state, and that state is being transferred to the UI. It is rendered into the UI, that is presented to the end user, right? Now what happens, like, since the cart has two parts, one that is managing the state of the cart, another that is showing the visuals related to the cart, and also providing user some options to manage the cart, like removing the items or adding more items, changing the quantity and all that stuff, right? Now what happens, when we selected the product from the product catalog here, this is the product catalog page. When we selected a few product from here, it ultimately, what it does, it updated the state of the cart. So it put two product objects in the cart, right? And this state is rendered onto the UI screen, right? So this is the one way of data, that is, like, you change the state and that data flows to the UI. Now when the user makes some changes in the in the UI of the cart, through the UI of the cart, he makes some changes. Let's say he selected, he removed few products from the cart, right? Now these changes has to be reflected back into the state of the cart, right? Now these two things, the state of the cart and the UI of the cart, they should always remain in synchronization, right? So this process of keeping the state and the UI in sync automatically is what we call two-way data binding, right? So this is the concept of two-way data binding in its entirety, right? You don't need to understand anything beyond it, because this is it, right? Now what happens, like, before the arrival of these frameworks, these big frameworks, like, and libraries like React and Angular, uh, so what developer used to do, they had to manage the UI, they had to synchronize the state and the UI manually. Means whenever there is a change in the state, they had to recreate all the UI, all the items in the cart manually by calling out the DOM APIs, like create element, or all the DOM stuff, creating the DOM node, updating the DOM node. Okay, and that is very unoptimized way to do it, right? Because whenever there is a new item, a developer used to create the entire list again and again. Okay, so you are basically mutating, you are manipulating the DOM manually, and there is a cost attached to the DOM operation, right? So the DOM API is very slow, because you're not just creating the node, there is an entire series of steps which the browser has to take in order to draw it, in order to calculate its position, its layout. So there is a technical term for it, the critical rendering path. You must go through it, you must understand it, right? Now what happens, earlier we had to do this synchronization manually. Now comes the Angular or React, who does this, who basically optimized on this problem area, on this. Okay, let's understand the two-way data binding in Angular through ngModel. So Angular provides one directive ngModel using which you can make use of two-way data binding. Okay, so how it works. So this is a very high level overview of two-way data binding in Angular, and we will deep dive into it later on. We will also code it. So what happens, you define a property in the component and you want to attach or you want to bind that property to some form element which is defined in the template of that component. Okay, so let's assume we have an input element defined in this component. So input having type equal to text. So what we do, we apply this directive first, that is ngModel, and we also pass one input property which is accepted by this directive. Okay, so ngModel accept the same property, means it accept the property with the same name, ngModel. So we can use this square bracket. So this is something, square bracket is used for applying the input binding to any of the directive or any of the component. Okay, so this name is property is defined here in the component, we pass it to the ngModel directive. Okay, so this is the first flow of data, that is you apply the directive onto the on your input and you pass the data. Okay, so this is the binding we apply on the ngModel. So what happens now when the chain detection kicks in, ngModel will get all the input properties which you pass to it. Okay, now what it does, it will basically synchronize the input with the value, with the input value, the name property you provided to ngModel. It will synchronize it with the input element. Okay, it will set this property, it will set the name on the input. Okay, so it will be like something like this. So this arrow specifies the direction of data flow. You set a property in the component, you pass it, you apply it on the ngModel directive, and it ultimately ngModel will update the input element value attribute. Okay, this is the one way of data flow. Another data flow can be initiated by the user. Like let's say user is typing something in the input. Now we want whatever user has typed in the input, we want it to be synchronized with the name property or with the input property you passed to ngModel earlier. Okay, so both these to be in sync. Okay, so another data flow is something like this. We have a change in the input property and it should be reflected back into the component prop. Okay, so what happens now Angular this ngModel directive somehow gets to know about, like, something is changed in the input. How it gets to know, that we will discuss. So this is a high level overview. Okay, we will break down this synchronous logic, like how ngModel gets to know about input, how ngModel updates the input. Okay, so that is covered in the later part of the video, so stay tuned. Now as soon as ngModel gets to know about that something is changed in the input, what it will do, it will emit an event. Okay, it will emit an event and pass the data to the component through ngModel. So this is the output event which is emitted by ngModel change, right? So you can see we have also subscribed for the ngModel change event which is emitted by the ngModel. Okay, so this is how two-way data binding works in the Angular. So let's understand the two-way data binding in Angular through an example now. So we have a form here with two inputs, email and phone, and we are going to apply the two-way data binding on both of these form inputs. Okay, so let's move to the code now. So before we start coding, first thing you will have to make sure, like, you import the form module, right, before you try to use any of the directive which the form module provides to you. So ngModel is part of ngModel directive is part of the forms module. So it is exported by the forms module. So first is make sure you import it and put it into the imports area of your ngModule. Okay, now move to the app component. So this is a syntax to apply the two-way data binding to any of your control. First you specify the ngModel, and on the right side give the expression, means the property which you want to bind, and this property must be defined on the component right here. So yeah, so if you are not aware of this syntax, this is also called banana in box syntax. Okay, I will explain it. I'll just deep dive into it, like what it signify, like this square bracket, this parenthesis, right, and why. Okay, and why we're using it this way. Okay, so we will explain. Now let me check first if it is applied correctly or not. So we will have to check both the scenarios. So let's assume, so as of now there is nothing here, blank, okay, on the email and on the input both. So let's put some value here. So I and give a default email address to the email field, and I apply the two-way data binding on this, and you will see it is correctly reflected in the input, right? What if I make some change here? Let's say 1 2 3. Okay, you can see if there is a change in the input, it is reflecting back into the component property. So yeah, it is we are able to achieve both the flows of two-way data binding, right? Now coming to this syntax, like what's so special about this? So this is a micro syntax, right? So Angular gives you some micro syntax, like in case of ng4 it gives you a micro syntax. Similarly for the two-way data binding, it gives you a micro syntax, and Angular also calls it banana in box syntax, right? Now what's happening in the behind the scenes, I'll just give you a brief overview. So basically, okay, so now let's apply the two-way data binding to the second input, that is phone, but in a different way, which you might not have seen so far. Okay, so first what happens, like let's apply the input. So apply the directive and pass one input property, right? So ngModel accept one input property by the same name, ngModel. Okay, so the input property name is ngModel, and so we apply we are just passing the input property now, right? And whatever value you pass here, it will set on the input, underlying input element or underlying host element, right? So what we pass here, we pass phone. So there is another input defined in the component, that is phone. So we apply this as a so we apply the phone variable defined in the component onto this directive. Okay, so what will happen now, you will see, okay, there is nothing. So let's enter the number here, type something. Okay, just remove this. So you can see yes, so the number we defined, number we passed in the to the ngModel, it is getting reflected in the input. Okay, but you see there is a change. What if I make a change here, right? Let's say if I type something, okay, so you can see it is not reflected back into the component property, right? Why? Because we have applied only one data flow here, right? So we are just passing the component property to the ngModel, and ngModel set it onto the input where ngModel is applied, right? But what about if what about if user is changing in the applying some changes in the input, it should be reflect back to the okay, but the other data flow is not working here, right? That is when the user types something in the input, it is not reflecting back into the component, right? That's why we will have to implement the second data flow, that is from the input to the component, right? So what happened, ngModel it also emit one output event, right? It emit one output event by the name ngModel change, right? And so what we do now, we subscribe to that event. So whenever there is a change in the input, ngModel will emit this event, and we can make an update on the component property phone. So what we can do, we can simply update the property right into the template. We can pass the expression here, that is phone equal to $event, right? And let's check now. Yes, the first flow of data, that is from component to the input, that is fine, that is working fine. And if I'm typing something, yeah, it is getting reflected here. Okay, so we achieved both the data flows, that is from component to the input and input to the component, and thus we achieve two-way data binding through this. But you can see the syntax and the second, and the way we implemented two-way data binding on the second input, right? So when the Angular compiles the template, it basically expands this syntax into this one, right? So it's a short syntax, or you can say it's a micro syntax, right? So whenever you want to bind something, whenever you want to apply the two-way data binding to some property, on some form control, it's better to do it this way, right? This way, using this micro syntax. I hope it bring clarity through this video. You are now well versed in the two-way data binding, how it works in Angular. And in the next video we are going to implement the ngModel directive, right? So we will deep dive into the implementation of ngModel, like how ngModel is so generic when like it is applied to any of the form control, and how it is able to track the value of the form control and make updates based on the inputs passed to it. So stay tuned, stay connected with the channel by subscribing and pressing the bell icon so that you don't miss the next videos. Till then, bye bye.